All right, so they just released the college football playoff rankings after week 10 of the college football season. I'm just going to run through the top 7 here because this is what I have available right now listed in front of me and just an easy way to see it. Number 1, Georgia, no surprise. They absolutely deserve it. Number 2, Alabama. Also not shocking despite this past weekend. Ohio State is at number 4. Oregon's at number 3. You got 5, Cincinnati, 6, Michigan, and 7, Michigan State. So Cincinnati gets left out of the top 4 again, and Ohio State jumps into the top 4. This is not surprising. I actually like this group of 4 right now. I think Oregon is still the odd team out, just on a talent basis. I know they have Kayvon Thibodeau. They've got Vernon McKinley. They've got Mikael Wright. They've got so many good players on that team. But comparatively to guys like Ohio State that have 3 future first-round wide receivers, to Georgia that has legitimately, like 7 or 8 defensive players who can get drafted this year. And then Alabama, of course, having, well, not the best rosters had in recent history, still a very talented roster. And someone like Bryce Young, QB, is going to be a future first-round pick. You've got a lot of talented players. 2 receivers can be drafted this year. Billingsley barely even plays a tight end. He's going to get drafted probably. And, of course, the defense, well, not a world-ranking defense like we've seen in the past. They have a lot of talent there that's going to be drafted as well. Probably only behind Georgia in terms of defensive prospects for the upcoming draft. Let's just start looking at each team individually. We'll start with number 1, Georgia, and work our way down. Georgia, of course, just run through their schedule. Outside of that 10-3 win over Clemson in week 1, everything's been pretty easy for them. I mean, they've been blowing teams out. The next closest game is probably a 30-13 win over Kentucky, where maybe they were close for the first half, but after that it felt like a blowout. And they get Tennessee, then Charleston Southern, and then Georgia Tech to finish the year off. So they're probably going to go undefeated in the regular season. Tennessee's an underrated team, so maybe they give them a run for their money, but it feels like Georgia is pretty much a lock to be undefeated for the regular season at least. Alabama so far. Alabama only won 20-14 this past weekend against LSU. LSU almost always gives them trouble. This Alabama team is clearly vulnerable. We saw them lose to Texas A&M, so they are one loss team sitting at number 2 currently. But they beat Ole Miss pretty significantly. They beat Florida barely. That's another team they barely scraped by. And they do get New Mexico State this coming weekend, which is not going to be much of a challenge. They get Arkansas, who was ranked previously fairly high, so that'll be interesting. And then they get the Iron Bowl against Auburn. And Auburn's a pretty good team. I know Auburn's racking up losses, but they have a lot of really good defensive talent. Most of their issues are on the offensive end. They have a really talented defense. So it'll be interesting to see what that matchup looks like. Alabama, not secure number 2, but like long term. Right now it feels like they're secure in the number 2 spot, but long term, I could see them dropping off. Number 3, Oregon, the team that feels like they're kind of overachieving and a little overranked in this situation. It's nothing personal against Oregon. They have some really good running backs. They've got some really good talent on that team, but it feels like that offense is just a cut below some of the other offenses out there. And, of course, Georgia doesn't have a fantastic offense, but they have an elite defense. And, again, Oregon has 3 really good defensive prospects at least, but it's just not the same as having what Georgia does, just depth everywhere. And Oregon closes out the year against Washington State, then Utah, and Oregon State. So really their only chance for an upset here in the regular season is probably Utah on November 20th, because Utah does have some very good talent defensively at least. And the only loss for Oregon is that overtime loss to Stanford, which is not a good loss, but it was an overtime game. So you have to consider maybe that boosts them a little bit. I think Thibodeau didn't play that game, or he missed the half of that game, something like that. So Oregon holding on number 3. I think 3 is probably a little too high for them, but we'll see how in the long run. Ohio State has looked much better. At least I thought they were looking much better with Stroud at quarterback, and he's kind of figuring everything out. Offensively, Henderson is just fantastic at running back, and they have 3 future first-round picks at wide receiver. They're just a very talented team. And even defensively, they have some pretty good defensive talent, but not as good, especially in the secondary, as in years past. This past weekend, not great for them either. They beat Nebraska 26-17, but it was close for a lot of that game. And it really felt like Nebraska had a shot to win that one. They did beat Penn State the week before that, so that's a pretty good win. Of course, their only lost the years to Oregon, but they've only played like 2 ranked teams this year, Oregon being one, Penn State being the other. Now, they do have a gauntlet to finish the year off. They get Purdue next week. Purdue has already beaten Iowa when Iowa was ranked number 2 in the nation, and they beat Michigan State when Michigan State was ranked in the top 4. So they get Purdue, who's played spoiler so far this year, That's next week. Then it's Michigan State, who is still ranked pretty high. They're ranked currently number 7 in the college football playoff poll. So that's a pretty good matchup. Then you get Michigan, who's currently ranked number 6 in the college football playoff selection committee. So that's a really good matchup to see those two games back to back. And you get whoever you get in the championship game. But the end of the regular season here is going to prove a lot about the Buckeyes. We're going to learn a lot about their offense and their ability to just handle the adversity of playing 3 back-to-back really good teams, or at least really challenging teams. So I think the Buckeyes are going to be a team that we're going to learn the most about down the stretch here, compared to the other teams we've talked about so far. Cincinnati at 5. This is not shocking to me. I don't know how you could have put Cincinnati into the top 4 after what they did this past weekend. And I've been pounding the table saying, oh, don't worry about it. Cincinnati's going to make the playoffs. I've said it up until they came out with 7 last week or something like that, or 6? I don't know. And at which point I realized, oh, wait, they might not actually make it. And I mean, this is part of the reason why, though. I mean, look at the games they've had. They beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame was ranked in the top 10. I want to say I think they were 10 in the poll last week. So that's not a bad win. That's a pretty good win, actually. But the other close games, you had a semi-close game to Indiana. And Indiana is not necessarily a feature win. You can't say Indiana is not a good football team. You barely beat Navy by 1 touchdown, and just beat Tulsa by 8. But Tulsa was on the goal line, almost scored a touchdown to get to that 2-1 conversion to try tie it and force overtime. And Desmond Ridder has not been lights out. Desmond Ridder has really struggled at points this year. Ford has not run well the past 3 weeks, Jerome Ford. So it's just this is an underachieving Cincinnati team. It's underachieving. They have not dominated the way they should in some of these games, which is why you're not in the top 4 right now. Now, could that change? Absolutely. All you need is for Alabama to potentially lose to someone other than Georgia, because if Alabama loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game, the way things are going, I think there's a legit chance the playoff committee is going to put a 2-loss Alabama team in ahead of an undefeated Cincinnati team. But we'll see. There are certainly options. If Ohio State loses another game, Ohio State will absolutely not get in ahead of Cincinnati. But you have to really watch yourself here. And again, 3 of the teams in the top 7 here are all in the same conference. And Ohio State, Michigan State, those teams have to play each other. So you get Ohio State versus Michigan, then Ohio State versus Michigan State down the stretch here. That will work itself out. Georgia will likely play Alabama in the SEC championship game, so we'll get a little bit of action there. So don't feel too panicked here. There's going to be some movement if you're Cincinnati, but you do have to really start to wonder, what do you have to do here? How likely is it you just get left out again? And I'm starting to think, wow, there's a real chance that could happen now. Michigan at number 6. This is not necessarily shocking. I know Michigan State has a head-to-head win over Michigan, the same way that Oregon has a head-to-head win over Ohio State, which is why Ohio State's probably not ahead of Oregon in the poll. But Michigan State losing to Purdue the way they did was just so bad. It's a bad loss. And Michigan losing to Michigan State's not a bad loss, per se. If there is such a thing as not a bad loss. So that's why Michigan's ranked higher. Michigan, of course, coming off a 29-7 win against Indiana. So a pretty solid win by the numbers. The only close games, they had a 3-point game against Nebraska. That's not a good win, really. And I'm not sold on this Michigan team. I'm not sold on their passing game at all. McNamara's had his issues this year. He's had some good games, but he's had some bad ones as well. Haskins, the running back core in Michigan is fantastic. One of the best in the country. But I'm just not sold on the passing game. Aiden Hutchinson's great. I forget his name. I think it's Ajabo. The pass rusher across the room is also fantastic on the defense. They have some really good players. Daxton Hill is really good for them in the defensive backfield. But it's not a next level defense. It's not a Georgia or Bama level talent defense. So we'll see how that plays out. They still have to play Penn State. They get Maryland, and then they get Ohio State. So they have to play the number 5 team in the nation, number 4 team in the college football playoff selection committee's current rankings right now. They get number 4 Ohio State. They get Penn State, who's still a pretty good team. And then I said they get Maryland. Maryland can always throw some curveballs that you would just get blown out. They're pretty unpredictable. So that's 2 good games here. And again, it works itself out because Michigan has to play Ohio State. So you're going to have another team lose. And if it's Michigan, then Michigan will no longer be competing with Cincinnati for a spot in the top 4. And if Ohio State loses, then Ohio State will no longer be competing with Cincinnati for a spot in the top 4. And the last team I want to talk about, team number 7, Michigan State, unfortunately, dropping one to Purdue, which really, it really makes it difficult for them. But hey, you get Maryland, again, another team that's it's a very weird team. You don't know what you're going to get from them week to week. And it's the same teams that actually Michigan still has to play. Maryland, then it's Ohio State. So see how it works itself out. And then it's Penn State. Penn State's still a very good team, despite some recent losses. So that will work itself out, and we'll see. If they lose one more game, they're just not even in contention. Same with Michigan. You will not have a 2-loss team in contention for the college football playoffs unless that 2-loss team is an Alabama team that loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game. That's the only one that I see will have a shot at getting into the college football playoffs with 2 losses this year. And that's about it. The other teams up there, I know there are more we could discuss. You want to talk about Wake Forest? I really don't. I don't care. Losing UNC should be all that matters. Even if they've gone undefeated, I'm not putting Wake Forest in the college football playoffs, so that doesn't matter. I don't care really if UTSA made it or not. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't. So, yeah, I think we're just going to cut the video off there. That was a pretty good one, but I think we're getting closer and closer to seeing how this is all going to play out. Again, none of this matters right now. It won't matter for another 3 weeks. But, hey, Cincinnati hanging in there, almost in. We'll just have to wait and be patient here and wait and play the waiting game as all this plays itself out through the final couple of weeks of the regular season. But for now, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you all later.